confession time. Sometimes I get pulled into like watching a lot of reels on social media. And I've noticed something in myself, and that is when someone, particularly women, because of algorithms, what I see is different than what you see probably. So what I see is a lot of perfectly curated home spaces and perfectly done up faces. And of course, they're all like trying to sell something or promote something. And I have found in my own personal commitment to authenticity and to being real, I have found a deep distrust of things that look too perfect, of people that look too perfect. Like, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say unless you are real with me. And there are some reels or social media accounts where people are real. And I've noticed that I'm much more likely to listen to what they say, even if there is a few reels in particular where their hair is done perfectly, or even if they're selling something. If I know that they've been through some things and they've been able to talk about it, I'm much more likely to listen. And I've realized this past week as I was studying for this sermon today that I kind of have the same reaction to some of the Psalms. Especially the Psalms that are like the singing praises Psalms. Kind of like that's a little too perfect. That's a little too highfalutin. Nope. I don't identify with it. I don't feel it. I don't want to go there when things seem too high and lofty. And then I was reminded this week, I told you last week, I've started this practice of listening to audio recordings of like the whole context of the scripture for the week. So I start a few chapters before and then listen through a few chapters later. And what I was reminded of as I did that is that the Psalms is a very diverse book of the Bible, a very diverse book of the Bible. So what I discovered is, this author has been through some stuff. So this psalm of praise that we're going to work through today, this psalm of praise, once I understood again that this author of the Psalms has been through some stuff, I was like, oh, okay, now I want to listen. Now I want to understand where you're coming from and what's happening. So what I'm talking about, just real briefly, what I'm talking about is there's sort of three categories of Psalms. The scholar Walter Brueggemann talks about this, that there's three sort of categories of Psalms. Orientation, Psalms of orientation, Psalms of disorientation, and Psalms of new orientation. So orientation, Psalms of orientation, I think of that, this might not be exactly accurate, but it's close enough for our purposes. They're like the Psalms of your first formation, like the Psalms of your family of origin, when the way that you understand the world is not complicated, and here's the set of truths, and this is how the world is. Those are Psalms of orientation that sort of describe the world as it is. Psalms of disorientation are Psalms that are written when everything has been a dumpster fire, when nothing makes sense, and the author of the Psalms is crying out to God. There are lots of those Psalms. They're Psalms of lament, mostly, Psalms of disorientation. It's a great place to turn if you are in that place yourself, is the Psalms of lament, when nothing makes sense. And boy, that author of the Psalms is real bold in saying some things to God. And then there's Psalms of new orientation, Psalms where a person has gone through that disorientation and then finds themselves looking back and having hindsight and being able to see God's faithfulness playing out, having enough of the questions answered or enough of the angst sort of settled that they can give thanks. And that's what this giving thanks psalm is for today. It's a psalm of new orientation after the author of the Psalms has been through some stuff. So know that that is in the background, and in the background of all these highfalutin praise words, that this author has been through some stuff. So it's Psalm 98, and we're gonna read it, and then we're gonna work together to make our own version of this psalm. It'll be fun, I promise. It will be fun. So Psalm 98 is actually was the inspiration for the hymn "Joy to the World." Joy to the world, the Lord has come, let earth receive her King. And you will hopefully see that in some of the verses that we'll read in a minute. It's a psalm that we use at Christmas and Easter. So it's a celebration psalm. At Christmas and Easter, it's the assigned psalm because it's looking back on what God has done and celebrating what God has done. But there's a little twist in it too. It's not just looking back. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the last thing that I want to say, or almost the last thing I want to say about it, is that it's an enthronement psalm. So as this author of the Psalms has been through some stuff and the disorientation phase, this psalm envisions God on the throne, envisions God as king. Now, we have a lot of baggage that we bring with the idea of God as king, with the understanding of what it means to be a king, the kind of corruption that often goes with power. And I want to invite you to kind of let that go and enter into the world of the author of the psalm, where the image of God as king means that all is right in the world. That all is right in the world. And in particular, there's some language in here about victory and vindication and judgment that I feel like, ooh, I don't like that idea of God's judgment. Ooh, I don't like that idea of God like conquering enemies, because of a lot of imperialism and harm that has been done. But I would like to invite all of us into that image of God as king as simply to be an expression of all being right in the world. Rob, there's a box and a basket there. If you could, there's pens and pencils and then the worksheets. If you and Olivia could maybe hand out, Olivia, you could go to that side and give everyone a sheet and a pencil or a pen, okay? And maybe you could ask for Ava's help or for Miss Jess's help, okay? You can walk right down that aisle and hand those out. And for those of you on the live stream, we're gonna work through this worksheet, and you can access it using this QR code. You can scan it, or if you're here in the sanctuary and want to follow along on your phone or refer to it later, you can do that too. All right. So you'll get the thing in a minute. I'm going to keep talking while we're handing this out. So there's, as we get ready to sort of write our own psalm, there's a couple things I want to say. That is that this psalm is an expression of joy. It's an expression of giving thanks for what God has done. And joy and giving thanks, it feels over the top. Like how the author writes this feels a little extra. So let's be extra today. Will you join me in that and maybe being a little bit extra and expressing joy and thanks for what God has done? We tend to be, I think, a little bit more reserved and hesitant to give thanks. Maybe that's because it's really vulnerable. I don't know. But let's be bold in giving thanks as an expression of gratitude for what God has done. So there's 3 sections in this psalm, and each section expands on the previous section. So there's an expanding scope of this psalm. At the beginning, the author of the psalm it's like me and my little group are giving thanks. And we're giving thanks using our voices. And the time span of what we're giving thanks for is stuff that God has done in the past. So it's our little community using our own voices and giving thanks for what God has done in the past. And then we see this expanding into section 2, where the author of the psalm invites other people to join in praise for what God has done. There's this beautiful joining between us and them in this psalm, that there's the community itself, and then they're inviting all the nations, all the earth to give praise. And they're expanding from their voices to using musical instruments. And then the third section invites all of creation into giving praise. And not only for what God has done in the past, but also for what God is going to do in the future. And the instruments giving praise are the sounds of creation itself. So I'm going to read it. You can follow along. We're not going to put it on the screen. You can follow along on your paper. And notice what stands out to you. What do you resonate with? What do you not resonate with? And then after we read it, I'm going to hand out a worksheet to help us make our own Psalm 98, which you can work on either on your own or with some of the people around you. Let's have a little adventure, another adventure. So let's read, this is old school, let's read every other verse. So I'll read verse 1, and then we'll all read verse 2 together, and so on. Hang in there with me. It's a little warm in here. Are you all getting tired? Like people are yawning. Okay, I'm going to take off my jacket. We can do this. I'm ready. I got my cheerleader ponytail today. We can do this, you guys. Okay. All right, I'm going to read verse 1, and then you can join me on verse 2, and I'll read verse 3, etc. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have gotten him victory. The Lord has made known his victory. He has revealed his vindication in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his steadfast love and faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the victory of our God. And then turn over the page. We're on verse 4. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with the lyre and the sound of melody, with trumpets and the sound of the horn. Make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. Let the sea roar and all that fills it, the world and those who live in it. Let the floods clap their hands. Let the hills sing together for joy at the presence of the Lord, for he is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity. Ooh, we almost did that perfectly. Thank you. All right, so we're going to have a worksheet. Rob, I have these up here. If you and Olivia could hand these out, that'd be great. Thank you for your help. So what the psalmist, I don't want to say that feels like my dad, the psalmist. What the author of the Psalms is doing is calling on familiar things in his or her world. So we don't have lyres. We have trumpets and trombones. That's beautiful. But we have different things that feel joyful. So the lyre and the trumpet and those instruments would have been things that they would have used in their community to express praise. Those were praise-feeling things, joyful-feeling things. And your invitation is to imagine what feels joyful to you. What are the particular kinds of sounds, types of music? Are there particular artists? What feels joyful to you? And that will be in section 2, because we use what's in our context in the same way that the author of the psalm used in their context. So I'm going to invite you to be a little bit bold. In verse 2, write your own verse about God's goodness in the past. What has God done? What has happened in your life that can't be explained away? Write a little, it doesn't have to be poetic, just write a sentence stating what happened, stating something that is good in your life. And then in section 3, we get to name parts of creation that feel joyful, and then the sound that that part of creation makes. So we're not gonna take enough time for you all to do the whole thing. So you guys in this section, you guys do work on section 3. You guys in the middle work on section 2, and you guys on this side work on section 1. And then I'm gonna invite you to be bold in a few minutes and to shout out what you wrote in. All right? Go to it.